All right, so let's start with the big story that we're tracking on WION this hour, where in China the death toll from the coronavirus outbreak has now risen to 80, and it's being reported that as many as 2,744 people have been infected by this new virus so far. And to give us more in terms of what is unfolding on the ground in China, we're joined in by our correspondent Patrick Falk, who I'm given to understand is presently in Beijing. Good afternoon to you, Patrick. Give us a sense of what's actually playing out. We're given to understand that the city of Wuhan has been in a lockdown. What is the situation like out there? What has the Chinese government been doing to try and contain the spread of this virus?
Well, yeah, Wuhan city has turned from a state of panic into a state of desperation, and the central government has been taking an increasing direct approach in matters. Today we've heard that Premier Li Keqiang has gone there himself to assess the situation. Of course, we also know that they've really expanded containment efforts there. They've also, as we know, sent in 450 military medics to try and contain the outbreak. That's on top of this massive move to build two hospitals, purpose-built hospitals for coronavirus patients, to house them. They're meant to be built within the space of 10 days. It's something that people have been marveling about. But, you know, these are both meant to house at least 1,000 patients. So it gives you an idea of just how much numbers could still rise. We're told, as a matter of fact, that there are as many as 30,000 people under observation right now. So, you know, we're going from potentially from 3,000 patients, possibly all the way up to 10 times that, if many of those are found to have contracted the virus.
Absolutely, indeed. And now we're also given to understand that there are over 2,700 people who are said to be infected by this virus. This number can, in fact, rise. Is China finding it hard to, in fact, try and contain this virus?
Well, it certainly doesn't want to project that image, and the central government is partly taking a more direct approach because of that. But there's no doubt a certain amount of people that are losing confidence, certainly in the provincial level handling of the crisis. It's shown no sign of improving as the days have gone by. And in fact, you know, the figures that we've been seeing, the number of infections as well as fatalities, has been jumping dramatically, even just in the last 24 hours. So, you know, the other thing that's happening today is the head of the WHO has come to Beijing to learn more about China's efforts to contain the outbreak. And no doubt he's also coming to assess whether or not the WHO needs to declare this as a global health emergency. Remember, the WHO refrained from doing that at the end of last week, but, you know, things have been spreading even quicker in China, and there have been more outbreaks overseas. And the National Health Commission did actually say yesterday that the spread of the virus is accelerating.
Absolutely, indeed. And, you know, we've heard some pretty disturbing reports which say that the food supplies are running low, the hospitals are all jam-packed, there is a shortage of medicines and doctors. Has the central government, you know, tried in some ways, you know, give those medical facilities? It says that it wants to build two specifically built hospitals to contain the coronavirus, but is it succeeding in these efforts? Well, you'd imagine that if China says it's going to do it, it's going to do it. Whether or not it's going to succeed, we'll have to wait and see. But, you know, certainly those efforts are underway. We know about there being a supply shortage. It is difficult at this time of the year because, you know, in China they have the capacity to produce a lot of these things very quickly. But the problem is we are right in the middle of the Lunar New Year holidays. And factories, manufacturers, they're all shut down for the time being. And, you know, we're told that their capacity to produce more goggles, more face masks, more protective suits is only at about 40% of regular capacity. So this is compounding the situation. But in fact, you know, the government has also extended the Lunar New Year holidays as part of the containment effort. So people aren't going to be going back to work or school until at least after February 2nd here. Right. And, you know, one of the other things which a lot of people would be looking at is looking at the scale of this crisis that is unfolding within China. Now, the city of Wuhan is said to be roughly the size of London. It has a population of about 10 million people. That's well over a crore in terms of how we count in India. You know, is it at all possible to quarantine a city this size of London? Well, That is certainly what they're attempting to do. How successful we don't know. Of course, if people have slipped through the cracks, and there are suggestions that people were able to, certainly at the start of the week. But I think at this point, the government has made it very clear that there will be serious repercussions for anybody who does that. The government has also called for absolute transparency about the outbreak at this point. Of course, there's been a lot of criticism about government officials not stating clearly just how serious this was, particularly at the end of last week. But, last week we were talking about numbers of infections being fewer than 200. We're 10 times that right now. And as I say, the numbers could still rise a lot further. So there is a lot of fear right now. And, as I say, the transmission from human to human seems to be getting faster.
Right, and at this point of time, do we at all know as to how this virus has come about? Because there are reports which say that it perhaps could have been, first it had infected snakes and from there on it then jumped into humans. Do we have more information on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things that they are scrambling to do right now is to find the origin of the virus. As a matter of fact, there's been a lot of discussion about the link to bats, and several scientists have already pointed out that there is a similarity between the genetic makeup of the virus with coronaviruses that are found in bats. It's not clear at the moment whether or not it went directly from bats to humans, or whether or not there was an intermediary. And there is a discussion about whether or not it may have passed on from bats to snakes and from snakes on to humans. But the reality is they know very little about this virus right now. If they do find the source, that will help them know more about what the threat is exactly and potentially help them come up with a vaccine.
Absolutely, indeed. And also, this indeed is the time of the Chinese Lunar this year, perhaps the biggest cultural festival in China. The outbreak of this virus, how has it impacted businesses? How has it impacted the life for the common people? Because we're given to understand that there are a lot of restrictions, especially in public areas where there could have been, one would imagine, a lot of people who have gathered for the Lunar New Year celebrations. So how has that been impacted?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the government has called for a nationwide effort to isolate the disease. That includes, reporting cases of people that are showing symptoms on public transport. And, of course, they've closed down a lot of attractions. The temples that are very popular here in Beijing, a lot of attractions like the Forbidden City and Disneyland as well. So it's really been a miserable time for people, and it just doesn't really feel like Chinese New Year at all. In terms of economic impact, though, we are going to have to wait and see. Of course, there's been a reaction in markets, as we've seen, particularly in places like Hong Kong and here in China. But, businesses have already been closed for a number of days, and in the weeks leading up to Chinese New Year, as you can imagine, there's a real slowdown generally leading up to this important holiday. So we may not get a real sense of the impact until after this Lunar New Year break, but it certainly seems it's going to be significant. And if we're going to compare it with SARS, estimates put the cost of SARS on a global scale at as much as $100 billion and shaved off 1% of China's GDP that year.
Absolutely, indeed. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Patrick Falk, for joining us and getting us all those insights in terms of what is unfolding in China at this point of time. From panic, this is now a situation of desperation for the people who are trapped in Wuhan. We'll, of course, come back to you as more details emerge on this story. So as China's deadly coronavirus spreads, China has...